think we can start this whole thing off by, if you want to give a little bit, a little synopsis of yourself and how you came to find the path, and then we can get the ball rolling.
Okay, well, I'm not good at synopsis, but I'll try to keep it short. Yeah, so my name, well, you know my name, but how I came to the path, I think ever since I was a child, I probably had some sort of spiritual affinity or leanings. And so even though I grew up outside of Thailand, I actually was born and raised in the Philippines, but my parents were Thai. And my mother was quite interested in the what we call the Dhamma, that's the Buddhist teachings. And so I probably absorbed from just watching her, reading books about it, or just doing a bit of chanting and meditation when I was a child. I just sort of, I felt I enjoyed it. I liked it. And over time that just developed. I guess when I went to school, when I went to college in the States, that was one turning point when I sort of realized that, like, yeah, all this so-called success, going to a good school or that kind of thing, it's not all it's cut out to be, it doesn't really bring you happiness. And so that probably, I guess I can see it as testing my limits, like going to a famous university or a prestigious university and saying, oh, okay, that's gonna make you happy. So I know that kind of success doesn't make you happy. Or then living in New York City and working there, it's like sort of like, oh, fun life and that kind of thing. But that doesn't make you happy really deeply. And so by the time I was 25, I had returned to Thailand. And when my mother got very sick with something that was terminal, I realized, okay, my time's quite limited, isn't it? I mean, who knows when your time's up? So it made you really think about what's really important to do in your life. And the answer for me when that question came out was, well, the spiritual path is the most important thing to pursue in life. And so then I became much more like clear about it in my own head with that sense of urgency. And so that's when I first started thinking of becoming a nun, because it seemed that that would be the most devoted or full-time way to learn and practice the path. And about 5 years later was when I actually did ordain. And then since then, it's been about 11 years now. It's a gradual process of learning and studying and practicing and just seeing in little and maybe subtle ways, but over time you can definitely see that it does lead to greater understanding about things, that leads to greater peace and happiness in your life. So yeah, that's the nutshell version.
Yeah, and that's what we all chase. So you came to the US, and how long were you here for before you realized the American dream isn't quite what it panned out to be?
Well, it was my second year of university, and it's not necessarily American dream, but it's just the general standard, I guess, progression you're told, right? If you go to a good school, and then you might, get a good job, and then somehow, I don't know, that's supposed to equal happiness or something.
Yeah.
At first step, going to good school is like, well, this doesn't seem to lead to anything. It just leads you having to like do more and like prove yourself more. And so, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it the American dream, but just sort of maybe the worldly dream, sort of the idea of worldly success.
Yes, of materialism.
Yeah, material, but also status. It's about. I mean, I personally, I didn't actually want necessarily to go to like a prestigious university, but I just felt that if you got in, everybody would have expected you would go, right? I mean, that's just something that like, I felt I was just sort of just following what it is that society tells you is the thing to do, and then I realized that, well, who cares what society says? They don't have all the answers. They often tell you to do things that you don't seem to think actually leads to, real benefit or happiness. So then that was beginning beginning to see through that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was 2 years. It was probably my second, about probably my sophomore year at college.
And then was it more of like was there something that just dawned upon you one day, or was this like a gradual process of like, I gotta get out, gotta go do something else, or was just one day all of a sudden you're like, I gotta bounce?
I think, yeah, what was strange was that I remember like my first semester of sophomore year, I felt really happy. I felt like, oh, okay. Like the first year, you're just sort of settling in and adjusting to college life, and it's a bit stressful. But my first semester of sophomore year, I felt really great. I mean, I felt like, oh, okay, I figured out who my friends are, and enjoying the life there. But then for some reason, the second semester, I just started to I just got really down, and I think that and it was like kind of weird to me because it was almost like a flip. But I think what I was, maybe the beginning of sophomore year, you start to have to decide, what you want to major in, they call it concentrate there, but anyway, what you want your concentration to be, and what you want to do with your life, what kind of job you want to pursue. And I think when you have to ask those questions about sort of deciding the direction of your life, it probably brought to the surface what was going on underneath, which was some kind of, I probably was already experiencing it my first year, that sort of feeling like, what is this for? Like it was just like, I just felt the general trend. Of course, I mean, it's not the only thing people talk about, but a lot of times it's very much like, oh, what are you going to do for, whatever, for summer break? And you have to like say that, oh, you have some like really cool like job lined up, or some really like sort of, oh yeah, I'm going to go and like, do something very exotic in Costa Rica, or, like something cool that you can tell people to do. And I felt it was like constantly trying to brandish your accomplishments. And I guess deep down, I was just kind of like, what's the point of that, and also whether it really leads to happiness, because you feel like, oh, okay, all my classmates here are intellectually very intelligent, but a lot of them don't seem very happy. A lot of people seem just really pretending to be happy, but really, really stressed out, And I felt the same way. I mean, you're supposed to, if anybody asks you, how are you? You're supposed to say, oh, I'm great. I mean, there's no other answer that's possible, right? So that's like the thing you're supposed to say. You follow the script, that inside, I feel like crap, it's like, I'm like constantly stressed out about trying to achieve something I don't know what for. And I think that was going on inside. And I mean, looking back, I can say this with hindsight. At the time, I was just like bewildered, like, what's going on? Why do I feel so like crappy? But I think deep down, it was probably, I actually didn't agree with these values. I mean, deep down, I didn't really feel like that's what I really wanted to do in my life, is to pursue other people's approval, from whatever society said is useful to do, or considered successful to do. And I remember this very clearly, actually, that when I was asked during my interview to get into the university, the interviewer asked, well, what are your goals in life? And I didn't think about it. I didn't have a planned answer, but what popped out of my mouth was like spiritual growth, and to be mildly entertaining to family and friends. I mean, that was my goal in life, which I knew even as a young teenager. Deep down, I knew that's what I cared about. And I think seeing that none of that was really being met at university, that probably tipped off. It wasn't like a sudden epiphany, but it was probably this brewing sense of something's not right, and I don't really understand what the point of this is. And I'm surprised I never asked myself before in my life, what is the point of doing any of the stuff I do? You just kind of follow the steps, and you just, I don't know, you just kind of feel like, well, this is what everybody does, and this is what I'm expected to do, and you just don't really think about it too hard. But when you're forced to actually start thinking about it, and then you're like, yeah, what am I doing this for? And then you see that I don't have a very good answer, and that's not really, when we don't have a sense of true meaning in our life, that's very like you have no direction. And when you're lost and you're confused, it's not like a kind of misery of like something tragic happened to you, but there is a deep down misery of not knowing what you're doing anything for, that purposelessness. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something that actually is the cause of a lot of people's deep down, what's their cause of their unhappiness in life. And and often people just look at the surface level of, oh, maybe it's not the right job, or it's not the right whatever partner, it's not the right, just whatever variables that are easier to process or think about. But those deep down questions of like, oh, what is the meaning of life, that's a bit like, it's a bit much to possibly contemplate. And so, but I think looking back, that's probably what was happening.
So the gist of that is, I'm glad you said purpose. You were lacking purpose, and I think that's what is the biggest ailment of society at this point is excuse me. I just woke up, so I'm a little I'm a little
Yeah, that's all right.
so, but people put their like it seems, and I'm guilty of it obviously, is like placing my sense of purpose on materialistic pursuits or other egoistic pursuits. And it seems that this path has brought you just the sense of purpose that goes beyond that. Is that true?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, you realize it's like a bottomless pit, right? With materialist pursuits. I saw this it struck me because, I spent some time when I was young, when I was very young, but also just before going to university, living in Bangladesh, which is one of the, very poorly, like, I don't want to say poorly developed, it's not a very nice term, but, it's economically, um, you know, at that time, poverty stricken.
Mm-hmm.
And, like you would think, and you really did see people were struggling you could see people on the streets, everything, struggling to make a living, struggling to get enough to eat, that kind of thing. And you think, oh, right, this is human suffering. But then you went to America and, it's a completely affluent society. And yet, oh my God, in New York, like who did not have a psychotherapist? Who did not have like their shrink on their Christmas shopping list? It was something that you were like, wow, people here are really, really seriously troubled and unhappy. And you understood actually why. If your problems are at a material level, and it's like if you figured out how way to have a job or to make a living, that you had enough to eat, you had enough medicine, that kind of thing. It's a problem you can kind of solve. You see it sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. But if you have all of that and you're still unhappy, it's like, how do you solve that?
Mm-hmm.
There's no easy solution to that. And then the suffering is completely in your mental world. And that is like an abyss, right? And so seeing through that okay, material development is not the answer to solving human happiness. In fact, it probably digs you into a bigger hole
Mm-hmm.
because you have all your hopes pinned on that, and you just don't know how to compute when that's actually not leading to happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, so okay, material success, a reasonable level for human survival and comfort, okay, that is true. That is a requirement for basic level of human happiness. But beyond that, it's not to be found in the material world. So not that. But also that kind of worldly success, that's also endless, right? Because you're constantly, it's like what those Hollywood actresses say, right? You're only as good as your last hit movie, right? So you're only as good as your last so-called worldly success. And then you can't have success all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who can? It just doesn't work that way. So you're just setting yourself up for like ups and downs. And if that's your only source of like self-worth, it's really hairy. And it's kind of empty and it's endless. You're constantly having to scale the next whatever it is you set up to be your Everest. Everest is not the tallest mountain. Like there's like the next Everest and the next Everest, and it's just it's fatiguing. I don't know how people can keep doing that their whole life.
Yeah.
And so when you see that actually, you know what the problem is? The problem is suffering. The problem is the suffering that actually the root is in our own mind, and that's the only way out, is to solve it at the level of your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And when you realize that actually that is a way, that is a solution that could solve the whole thing, you know, that's actually that's the real light at the end of the tunnel. This is actually a way out of human suffering, because at the end of the day, no matter what it is, whether it's materialistic values or some sort of sense of status or societal acceptance, all that, what it's really answering is the human need for, I want to be happy. You know, I want to find some way to be happy, and to be happy in a sustainable way, not to be happy one day and unhappy the next. And so for me, it's like, well, if this is not something like some deep, profound spiritual insight. I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody wants to be happy, but to be able to really achieve true happiness, that's the only purpose in life, right? I mean, it's nothing more complicated than that. It's just, how do you go about it so you achieve deeper and deeper levels of happiness, and you understand more fully the cause of suffering. That's the only way to eradicate it, right? You have to get at the heart of the problem, the root of the problem. And for me, the spiritual path is the way to do that. That's the only, for me, it's like the only method for arriving at the ultimate solution.
Mm.
So, and then it's like, whatever you do, you know, you realize that this is the, also, like, not just for yourself, this is the best way to help other people. Like, if you can figure out how to end the suffering in your own mind, to the extent you're able to understand that, only to that extent will you be able to help share that with other people, so that you can help them to come out of their own suffering. Otherwise, it's solving suffering at a very superficial level. You know, even the most noble professions, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's invaluable to have doctors or that kind of thing. You know, of course they do very, very important work. But at the end of the day, everyone's going to die. You know, even the best doctor is not going to be able, at the, you know, when people come to the end of their, what we call their Kamma, you know, the most talented, brilliant doctor cannot do anything to reverse that. And you know, it's, even if you are able to extend someone's life, okay, you save their life after some car accident or something. But if the person doesn't use their life in a way that's meaningful, then you might just be like setting themselves up for like another 20 years of suffering, you know? Like, okay, you save them from the physical suffering, and then okay, they can live another 20 years with, like, you know, like chronic depression or something. And would that have really helped them come out of their suffering? Only to the extent that you're able to prolong someone's life, so they're able to really learn about suffering and really able to solve it at the root, then that's the only way it can be really meaningful. But ultimately, people need to be able to solve at the level of the mind. And so that's why it for me, it feels meaningful, because I feel, I mean, a lot of people think, oh, just, what do you do in the monastery? You're just sitting there on your bum meditating or whatever. How's that helping the world? You know, but if you look at it in the short-term view, it's like, okay, so we're not going to be contributing to some COVID vaccine. Okay, that's true. So we're not going to be able to solve problems at the immediate level. But in the longer term, and to be able to have that depth of understanding, that depth of wisdom, to be able to help people start to unravel their own suffering at the, you know, at the root cause, that's the way you can actually really help someone else. And it takes a lot of training, and it just takes a lot of practice, beginning with your own mind, to be able to do that, to be able to help other people do that. So I never feel, you know, that, oh, I'm just isolated and like doing my own thing, you know, and it's just some sort of personal like pet project or something. I always feel like, to the extent, whatever it is I'm learning about my own mind, I'm learning about the human mind, you know, And whatever I learn is something that will be useful to other people. So in that sense, you feel a sense of purpose, not only at a personal level, but also at the level of what I can contribute to other people or the benefit of other people. So then it's something that it's really fulfilling, no matter what you're doing, you know. And I mean, monastery life, I mean, a lot of the things are like, oh, sweeping the grounds of the monastery. It's not like earth shattering, but to the extent that, you know, I'm able to make the monastery a pleasant place for people who come, and their minds might be open to learning a bit more about some deeper truths. To that extent, I am contributing to their deeper welfare, you know. And so you can always kind of like couch it in that way. And so there's nothing that is completely mundane. There's always some deeper purpose to it. And when you have a deeper purpose to your life, that is the wellspring of happiness. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean you don't have your ups and downs on a day-to-day basis, but to be able to, at some level, be able to reconnect to that deeper purpose, that's very nourishing. That's really, it's like tapping into like pure spring water, you know. It's something that you'll always feel refreshed by it, cleansed by it, rejuvenated by it when you reconnect back to your deeper purpose in life. And so to be able to live from that place, it's such a blessing. It's really such a blessing. So yeah, to the degree that anyone can live from that place, I don't mean you have to be a monastic, but to the degree that you can easily, you have a clear sense or awareness of what is your deeper purpose in life. One, you have that awareness, you've been able to identify it, and it's clear in your mind. And to the extent you're able to reconnect and live from that place, that is a large determinant of your well-being and happiness in this life.
Oh, that was beautiful. I think, yeah, you hit the nail on the head right there. So summing that up, it seems as though society has misplaced our values and attaining happiness, and we're constantly on this hamster wheel of trying to find it and through the mind and through the, you know, the outside world. And it's just like you said, we're filling, it's just like we're creating voids, and then we're trying to fill it, and we're just digging the hole deeper and deeper. More and more we try to fill it with a boat or a person or a dirt bike, whatever you want, like whatever you think will make you happy if you buy it from someplace or somewhere. But what you're saying is, if
Right.
we figure out as a human species that happiness isn't really attained from that, it's through the dhamma, or, you know, other spiritual or whatever your purpose is in life, and then that'll essentially make us happier beings.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is our basic question in life, right? And just finding better answers, like higher quality answers to that question of how can I be happy, that will help you to really be happy, and to be happy in a more like profound way, you know. Not just, people often confuse happiness with pleasure, you know, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Pleasure is very ephemeral, and to be able to be happy when you're with the unpleasant, that's the true mark of, aha, you've got something deeper there. Because life is going to be a mixture. It is like, even the most enlightened beings have a mixture of pleasant and unpleasant experiences, you know. It's just part and parcel of living in this world. It's just, that's just part of the makeup, the fabric of it. So being able to be happy regardless of whether circumstances are so-called pleasant or unpleasant, because we have our settings. Everybody has their settings, what we consider pleasant or unpleasant. That's not a problem. It's not a problem to, some people like the cold weather, you know. some people don't. And so that's just a setting. There's nothing like, you know, intrinsically wrong about that. But when you're able to be with the circumstance that your setting says is unpleasant, and not have your mental happiness affected by that, that's the true mark of whether you've really answered the question of how to be happy. So yeah, so being able to do that.
So we're talking about purpose here. What is everybody's purpose? Because I believe in my personal belief is that all of our purpose is to help each other, essentially be selfless beings, compassionate beings, just kind of be a good person. And then from that, we all have our individual purposes throughout using our egos and through our individuality. What would you say purpose is? Your definition of purpose is along those lines?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I would always tie back the question of purpose to the question of happiness. So, our purpose in life is to figure out how to be happy, truly happy, and to help other people to be happy. So the mode in which you do that, like everyone has their talents, everyone, you could be an artist, you could be a writer, you could be whatever way of expressing that may be different. But I think ultimately, if you boil it down to something, bullet point, that would be about how to be able to be truly happy and help other people be truly happy. I think that's really all there is to it. And what differs is just how deep people go with that, how deep people are able to access true happiness and help other people to access that. There'll be gradations of that. But the way of expression, that's as variable as people's dispositions. So yeah, I mean, everyone, even among monastics, there's differences in temperament and differences in people's inclinations and what they're talented at, what they're skilled at. So there will be, different ways of expressing that. And that's all right, there's no like cookie cutter, this is like the only model, but behind that there is a unity of purpose. So I would say, like, whether it's through Buddhism or through another religion, if the ultimate question is always, what is it that causes humans to suffer, and how do we actually, alleviate that at the truest level, then that's also answering the same thing. But the question of being a compassionate person, that's not something you can just do. It's not like some kind of superficial being a nice person. It's not that. It's something far deeper, and it comes from a real wisdom that truly understands the human mind, and you can't fake it, and it doesn't always look nicey nice. Like compassion doesn't always wear the face of like nicey nice, as I would call it. It's like, if you see like, even the iconography of like bodhisattvas, the compassionate beings, there's some wrathful ones. There's some, it's like, oh, that looks kind of scary. Is that compassion? But compassion isn't about what it is you think a compassionate person looks like. It's about what it is the other person needs, the other being needs at that moment. What is the best way to help the other being? That is the most compassionate thing to do. And that doesn't come easy. That comes from going back to understanding your own mind. You can't really be compassionate if you don't actually understand the workings of suffering. So the only way you can really get that is through your own understanding of your own suffering and your own acceptance of your human condition. Oftentimes compassion becomes this a little bit like, oh, poor you, a little bit. There's a bit of, even in the nicest possible way, I am going to save you. There's a bit of like, somehow there's a superiority there. But real compassion is about that. It's I know you. That's me. I understand you because that's me. I have been through that. I am going through that. You actually have so fully and clearly understood the human condition from your own experience. And so that's the whole gamut, like, there's one quote I really like. It's from a Tibetan teacher who is now passed away, and he's got his fans and his detractors. But anyway, he said some really cool things. So Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he started a Buddhist university in Boulder, Colorado. So some Americans might know him. But one thing I really appreciated was his line that, I don't know if I'm quoting it exactly, but roughly, like in the spiritual practice, we have to be willing to be completely ordinary people. Like sometimes you think, oh, well, I'm a spiritual practitioner, and oh, how deep and, holy am I? And especially if you become a monastic, then it's like, oh, you're venerable, right? Sometimes I tell people, hey, that is just like a conventional form of advice. I'm not expecting you to consider me venerable. And I'm not saying that I feel venerable all the time. And sometimes if you look at my thoughts, they're not very venerable, But the thing is to not make that a problem, like that's something that it actually takes a little while, because when you become a monastic, you're like, oh my God, now I'm like venerable, I have to act so venerable. Oh, venerable me. But then to realize, the spiritual path is about seeing things as they really are and not having opinions about it, not making up opinions about it, just being able to see clearly things as they really are. And so that includes the whole gamut of human emotions, right? I mean, until you're fully enlightened, you're going to have what in Buddhist terminology it's called, it sounds so like, it doesn't sound very, it's not a very good translation, but in English the common translation is like defilement, but it's really sort of the root afflictions in your mind, which is greed, hatred, or aversion is another translation, and delusion or ignorance. So as long as you have these three roots somewhere lurking in your mind, which if you're not enlightened, you will, they're going to manifest in certain thoughts, and, as best you can to refrain from having that leak out into speech or actions, hooray, but, they're still lurking around there in your thought world. And to realize, like, that's okay, that's like so profound, but, it's okay is something really hard to live. Because you feel like, oh, I shouldn't have these thoughts, I'm venerable, I'm not supposed to be angry, I'm not supposed to be irritated, I'm venerable. But you know what? Yeah, if you have those three roots in there, they're going to manifest, somehow, sometime. And the only way you can really be compassionate to other people is to have a compassionate attitude to your own mind and what appears in your own mind from time to time. And that's something that takes a lot of it takes a lot of, I guess, being able to do away slowly with a lot of those expectations you have, or your ideas or your concepts, and that terrible word should, what it should be like, what I should be like, what other people should be like. You have to like strike that word from the record, like no should. Oh no, you shouldn't say should. I should. Oh no, I'm trapped in the world of shoulds. But the thing is, yeah, to be willing to be completely ordinary. I am like irritated. I'm really annoyed, and it's like a really like whatever petty matter or something. But you know what? To be honest, it's ticking me off. And to be able to like see like, oh, okay, so how does that actually lead to actions that cause me more suffering, rather than judging the whole process. The key question is, again, it's like so basic, and yet it's always the theme to return to. It's like, well, how is this amplifying or reducing my suffering? How am I causing myself more suffering? It doesn't become a moralistic question of should or should not, but is it painful? Does it lead to suffering or not? So it's like, if you have angry thoughts, is it, oh, bad, I shouldn't? Or is it like, hey, does this make me happier or less happy? Does it make me happier or not? And if it doesn't make you happier, then it's like, oh, wrong direction. And so, but you have to be willing to experience it. And that's something that what I realized is that we or I I don't know everybody, but I had this idea that possibly like going to monastic life might be motivated by a desire to escape, sort of escape the real world, or whatever we call the real world. But the more I've lived monastic life, I realized, you know what? Actually, the so-called real world is like the biggest escape. It's escape not from, people think, oh, okay, so you don't have to deal much with like whatever's going on in the world. Like I know different monastics differ, but I generally try to reduce to really not consume much about the news. Like maybe if something really important happens, the abbot will tell us or something, and for me that's enough. I don't browse news websites or research anything. And the thing is, people think, oh, that's like, oh, you're just sort of like keeping yourself in the little like bubble of ignorance. But actually that stuff, is like constantly like rewind, reloop, replay. I studied history in college, and it's like the same problems that happened in 1871 or 5 BC or whatever is like totally whatever's happening now. You just change the places and the names, and that's all. But it's actually the same stuff. So who cares if you don't know the latest version of it? But the thing is, knowing about that stuff is not making you more attuned to the real world. It makes you constantly live in the world of the external and not be in touch with what's going on in your own mind. And a lot of those other things, like I remember, when I was my phase of living in New York City, that would be the time when I would say, I was testing the limits of how much happiness you could get from just living from the point of view of not sensory experience is kind of a like abstract term, but it's basically what it is. People try to get happiness from entertainment or from stimulating conversations with people or whatever it is, even intellectual consumption, whether it's like cool ideas or whatever. That's
Podcast.
still just that kind of thing. Sorry to say, but if it's spiritual podcasts, I guess that's different. But,
we
but
could be talking about a lot worse things.
Huh?
We could be talking about a lot worse things right now.
Yeah, I guess so. But the thing is, it's how you're using it, right? If you're just consuming even spiritual stuff, if you're just consuming it as like another cool idea or some stimulating whatever it is that's just like entertaining, or not entertaining at the level of haha, but it's just feeding your like curiosity about something. But if it's not actually hitting to the heart of your own mind and your own experience of suffering, it's still just another form of consumption. And that doesn't actually, that's a form of escape. That's actually something that people use so they don't have to feel what it is that is distressing to them. So the thing is, when you actually spend a lot of time in silence or solitude, you don't even have to call it meditation, but just can be, I just don't know these days whether people have any actual space for silence in their lives. I mean, I became a nun before the advent of smartphones or tablets or like Facebook. The Facebook I knew was when we were in college. That's where it started. It was like the Facebook was the thing they handed out to you, where they had pictures of everybody in your class, the freshman Facebook. And what you would do is you just procrastinate from doing your papers, whatever, by like pouring through this thing and get everybody's faces. But that's all it was. It's not this like constant like update of, oh, and I went here and I ate that and whatever it is people use Facebook for. I don't know. I don't have an account. You know, and that was before my, yeah, I don't even know what it is really. And the thing is, when you have all that going on and constantly checking your phone, constantly being connected, even if you're not speaking, it's totally there's no space for silence and solitude, I would say. And I don't know, but from what I can intuit or, you know, infer from what I see, you know, like once a year I go visit my family and I just see how people live, you know, like how people who don't live in a monastery live. And it's just like, wow, they are just never away from those phones, only when they're charging or something. And if you don't have any space for some solitude, some silence, how can you ever get to know what's in your mind? And sometimes it can be a form of distraction or escape. A lot of times, this compulsive need to check your phone for whatever it is you have to check it for, it's because you don't know how to be still. It's like some compulsive, I mean, that's the real pandemic. COVID's not the pandemic. The pandemic is the inability to live without constant stimulation from the outside. And, you know, because sometimes it's a bit off-putting when you actually let yourself be silent. You don't check your phone. You don't talk to anybody. You actually hear what's going on in your own mind. And sometimes that is quite disturbing. It's like, whoa, that's like a big bag of weird, you know, that's, you know, that's like, that's not what I normally think about. And you can't stop thoughts either, most people, right? Unless they've had any kind of experience in meditation. As soon as they're silent, it's just like, whoa, it's like, I don't know, some huge marketplace in there. And it's disturbing. And especially if you have any kind of afflictive emotions, if you have some sort of anger or anxiety or, you know, jealousy or any of those things that is disturbing, it's like, oh, I don't want to actually feel that. I would rather like distract myself through something external. I would rather distract myself, whether if it's not your phone, it's listening to some nice music, it's like going out to talk to somebody, watching a movie, something so you don't have to feel that. Or if it's just that void you were talking about, when you actually, you know, I remember this. I remember that when I was I remember when I was living in New York, I subscribed to like 2 magazines and they would arrive on Wednesday. One was the New Yorker and one was like Time Out magazine, which was like telling you all the fun things you can do to distract yourself even more in the city, right? And there were some times when I would be like waiting for Wednesday to go check my mailbox and find those magazines there. And so that I could fill the void with something. I could somehow, like, I had like verbiage to read, you know, something new to read, so that I could I don't know, it's like that weird void that's there. You have to fill it with something, because otherwise it's just kind of unnerving. And this, not in like a really like, oh, I'm like, you know, being faced with a serial killer kind of scary, but there's something unnerving in the background, where it's like, oh, I don't want to hear that buzz, that sense of like, I don't know what it is, but there is this weird buzz of low level anxiety of the human experience when you don't have a purpose in life, you know, that you want to fill with something. And so people generally escape. That is our modus operandi, you know, anything that is uncomfortable, it's like, get me out of here. That is kind of like a default setting for most people. And until you start training your mind, that's immediately what you want to do. You want to run, you want to hide, you want to like not feel anything that's disturbing. And so when you actually have no escapes, so we can't watch movies here, we like to use the internet, I have to ask for permission, you know, and so like you can't just be sitting here lolling around browsing forever. And resources are limited, you know, so it's not like you could, even if you had the permission. And you don't have, we have very limited, even talking to other nuns here, it's actually we don't talk that much, like outside of, basic work things or whatever. There's a lot more of encouragement to be in solitude. It's not that we don't talk at all, we do have some friendly conversations, but compared to the average person not living in a monastery, what they do in their daily life, like the constant communication that goes on 24/7, it's much less here. So you have this space to really to look at your own mind and to not be able to escape it. There's no escape, right? Because you go back to your dwelling and you're there by yourself for like, let's say you go back by like 1 p.m., right? And you don't come back for like the group communal stuff until like 6:30 in the next morning, right? That's a lot of hours of just being by your little own self. And you cannot help but hear what goes on in your mind. I mean, there is no mute button for your own mind. Unless you're able to access deep meditation at a snap, there is no mute button you can just press. So you got to face it, man. And that is actually the least, I would say, the least escapist mode of living, where you really have to face up to the truth of what goes on in your mind. And that's where we live our whole world. Even if you think you live in an external place, it's not. It's how you filter it through your mind. It's how you're experiencing the world through your own mind, your own lenses. And until you get to know that, it's like, no matter where you are, I think that's the title of, I remember it was like my roommate's book. I didn't actually read the book, it was on the bookshelf. It was like, wherever you go, there you are. Some popular book, I guess in Dhamma circles or something. But yeah, and I was like, I didn't read the book, but that title was enough. And I'm like, that's right. Because I've lived in a lot of places, about wherever you go, I'm like, hey, this is familiar. This is familiar. My familiar ways of dealing with situations, dealing with life, reacting to people, reacting to things. It's like, this sounds, feels, looks, smells very familiar. So you can change the externals all you like, but you take your lenses with you. How you experience Italy, how you experience, Northern Thailand, how you experience Puerto Rico, how do you experience whatever it is. It's almost like in the Zoom thing, I see you can choose your virtual background. You can change the virtual background on the click, and then you could be at the beach, you could be at this grassy thing, you could be at this weird, blue room, but the you still looks the same. You bring your own mind to wherever you go and you experience it through that. So unless you train yourself in skillful habits, you could be the most pleasant, from a objective, I don't know, you could be at some sort of island paradise or something. And then you'd be thinking gosh, it's really hot here. And I'm getting tired of eating coconuts or whatever, no matter where you are, you can, if you have a negative, lens, you're habituated to experiencing life that may, then no matter where you are, that's what you'll see and that's what you'll experience. Or you could be in total dump, and if you're really sort of able to see the beauty in it, then your experience will be happy. So being able to get to know that, it takes a certain level of humility, and that humility is not something that you can turn on. It comes from seeing, over time that oh yeah, okay, this is what's happening in my mind. And some of it ain't pretty, and some of it I'm not proud of, but I'm willing to own up to it, that this is what's happening. And that becomes easier the more you think, this is not what's happening in my mind. This is not me. This is not my thoughts. But this is just, oh, it sounds so abstract. It sounds so abstract that sometimes you're it's like some platitude. But to the extent that you really do see that it's due to certain causes, certain whatever thought you might have. It's there because of some habit pattern that is built up over time, or a certain set of circumstances has triggered it. And this habit pattern has built up. So this is the kind of response that will come out. And this is not some personal failing, it's not anything you actually have any personal control over it. This is a process that's happening. It's a causal process that's happening. And, your job is just to observe it. And your job is just to best you can, just to the end. It's not that you actually best you can. It's not that you can try to do to the degree you have the wisdom to be able to redirect your mind when it's going down the wrong path, then it will happen. And to the degree you don't have the wisdom, you don't have that sharpness of mindfulness, you don't have the clarity at that moment, you can't. And it's got nothing to do with you. It's like the wrong paradigm. If you're setting this up as like, am I succeeding or am I failing? That's like the wrong paradigm. Am I a good person or a bad? Yeah, that was one thing I took note of when you used the phrase good person. It's like, that's also kind of the wrong paradigm. It's like, ultimately you can say, yes, in a sense, enlightened beings are so-called good people, but they're not good. They're just awake. They've gone beyond good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is not to strive to be a good person. The idea is to strive to be like an awake person, someone who knows what's going on. They know. And when you know, and you know what leads to suffering, what doesn't lead to suffering, then the causes of suffering no longer arise. And so that's something that it's something that takes a lot of going against your natural habits, because our natural habit is to just block out the parts that bother us, to live in denial. That is probably a very popular across the board, across cultures, way of dealing with life. And as long as you do that, you're never going to see the truth. So, but it's comfortable, it can be comfortable until it becomes uncomfortable. It's comfortable in the short term, and then it leads to more suffering. So actually it becomes uncomfortable. That's okay, because it's familiar. We're willing to be uncomfortable if it's at least familiar, right? It's a devil, and it takes a lot of courage to be like, okay, I'm gonna try something aside from the devil I know. It's unnerving. It's a little bit. It's like you're going to the deep end of the kiddie pool for the first time, and you're not quite sure if you're gonna drown, and you're not quite sure if you're ready, and you don't even know it's actually going to feel that good. So you'd rather stay in the shells, even though it's like kind of boring, and you've been there for your whole life. But it's what you know, and believe me, so much comfort is derived from what you know, what you're familiar with. So we're very willing to suffer if we're at least familiar with it, right? We're at some level we want to be happy, but if it involves something that's like beyond our comfort zone, we're a little bit hesitant. It's just too difficult to do something that you're not familiar with. So even if you're in misery, but if you're comfortable with it, you're familiar with it, then you might choose that. And often that's what we do. We just keep choosing that.
Do you think the first step? First of all, I say that was beautiful. That was a great passage of wisdom that you just bestowed upon everybody. So would you say the first step, let's say somebody doesn't know anything of Buddha, the Dhamma, anything. They just we'll just say like a regular Western person. A lot of people don't know anything of the Dhamma or anything about Siddhartha Gautama. They don't know they would be like, who is that? Let's say someone's listening to this for the first time and they just heard you say that beautiful thing about where suffering pretty much arises from. Is the first step, does it lie in self-inquiry and meditation and kind of just being able to step back from our escape and anything that will bring us pleasure and kind of just like diving into who and what we are just through silence and disconnection in a way?
Yeah, well, I think the first step is just to recognize your own suffering.
Becoming aware.
Yeah,
so how do you become aware?
Recognizing. That's right. I mean, a lot of all that escapism is masking the suffering that you actually are already feeling. It's just being covered over by the cosmetics of some sort of sensory pleasure. But being willing to be like, okay, can I actually really experience, what I'm feeling right now without the overlay? So it's very hard to do. You don't actually stop the overlay. So if sometimes you already kind of know, right? Like I used to remember, like I sometimes like turn on the TV or watch a movie because there was something gnawing at me. Something was bothering me.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to like somehow like distract myself from it. At some level, so you already know. But the problem is we go immediately to the cover up stage, and then we get lost in that, and then we're like, okay, we've lost touch with actually what instigated it. But if you are like, you know what, see what happens if I refrain from that urge to like distract myself, and I don't do that distracting thing, and I just do like feel it, just feel whatever that it is. And maybe you can only do it for like 10 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever. Like even feeling it for even like 5 seconds. 5 is like, it's long. You think, oh, 5 seconds, but I once saw this teacher do this, and he was trying to, it's like now you have to keep like, I don't know, scaling things back before it's like mini meditation is like, 10 minutes. And now it's like, okay, micro meditation, people, can you just do micro meditation, which is like counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when he did that, I was like, wow, that felt like a long time. It's like, actually, we don't do that. It's like a millisecond of discomfort. And we're like, okay. And we do our thing that covers over it. But if you just as an experiment, don't do that thing, even for like 5 seconds, and feel it, whatever it is you're feeling, feel it in your body, find the feeling in your body. That's something that you can't think about. If you go to the physical feeling, then you sort of like short circuit that whole like thinking route, which is gonna sometimes just spin off a whole storyline about it. So just feel it, right? And if you're like, oh, this feels like uncomfortable, then you're getting a direct taste of human suffering. Like you're willing to actually taste it, feel it. You're willing to own up to it. You're willing to like experience the actual reality of suffering. Oftentimes people say, oh yeah, I'm suffering, but do they actually know what it feels like? They have a rough idea, but we're so afraid to feel it. We're sort of conditioned to we want to like pretend it doesn't exist. So as long as we don't feel it, it's like it's not there. But yeah, it's like the big elephant. It's there.
What would you use another word for suffering? Like a lot of people use in like English translation from dukkha to suffering, I feel like isn't one-to-one. Is there any other term?
Yeah, I
that you would
know.
use?
It's just the tragedy of translation. Everyone should learn Pali.
Go learn Pali,
The
everyone.
way it was spoken at the time of the Buddha, but yeah, that's not possible. So we have to just make do with these like very yeah, you're right. They're not one-to-one mapping, and the concept of dukkha is much more subtle than that. It's not like out and out, ow, I'm suffering, or ow, or like, oh, I'm like, like just like crying, suffering. It's like any, one translation I kind of like is sort of like ill at ease, or the word disease. If you put a hyphen there, it's dis-ease.
Oh yeah.
There's just this sense of not being at ease with a situation or something. It's just, and it can be very subtle. It can be very like, it's not that you feel terrible, but there's just something that's not quite right in the universe. It's just something that's always just not quite right in the universe. And that is yeah, that can be one way of expressing it. But dukkha is like, it can be very sophisticated. It's not sophisticated, but it's just more complicated than that. I mean, just sometimes the slant on it is just, to translate as being like subject to change. Dukkha means subject to change. So it's that like instability of like nothing is going to stay the way it is. There's just this sense of like constant insecurity with living. It's like you're walking on thin ice. Like right now it's solid, it's holding your weight, but any moment, you can step on a thinner patch and you're like, you've fallen through. And so that's anything with our life. When we think we've made it, it's only like we've made it, but with this lingering like fear of like, how long is it going to last? This pleasant feeling, how long is it going to last me? And then when's the next big, whatever it is, problem going to happen? And so that constant insecurity is another way to to translate dukkha. And then that explains this, like I was talking about, that buzz of anxiety that exists in your mind. That's because at some level we know, we know that nothing's gonna last, baby. And because we know that, it bothers us, right? You know, it's kind of like, oh no, your whole life, you're kind of, there's a bit of oh no behind it all. Behind the smiles, behind the congratulations, behind this and that, there's always this like, oh no, when is the other shoe gonna drop? And yeah, that's like not a good way to live, man. But if you actually know that, you know, like at some level, you're not denying that, and you've made your peace with that, then you don't have that buzz anymore. And that's what enlightened people do. They don't have that buzz anymore. And it's like, of course, things change. Like, duh, you know, it's like, you know, it doesn't ruffle them, doesn't fluster them. It's just natural. And so it's that's something that is that's the key, right? That's the key, is seeing that clearly at a deep level. And then you're able to just live without that hope and fear, live without all of that. And it's very light and freeing. So to the extent we can do that,
we can be happy. Yeah. Well, at least, I don't know if happiness is really, is it more so of like a feeling of like liberation?
yeah, that's one of my favorite words. I remember when I was a kid, you know, I would say it in Thai, but the word was like Isara Sevi. It's like freedom. I don't know why, but as a kid, I was like running around the house, like, you know, sort of like saying that, you know, in this like sing-song voice. But I think that was like an expression of some deeper yearning for freedom, you know. We can call it that too. Maybe it's not the desire to be happy, but the desire to be free, like really free. It's free from what? Well, I guess free from dukkha. But there is that liberating sense, you know, when you're happy, there's nothing burdening you. There's a sense of freedom. There's nothing like pinning you down or tying you up. There's just a sense of like, I guess that's a really beautiful word, freedom. And it's yeah, but it's like a real freedom, you know. It's not a freedom to do whatever you want. Home of the brave, land of the free. I mean, it's not yeah, like free to like take whatever land you want and like take all the resources and, you know, do what you want when you want it. It's to be free from having those wants, you know. Like then you're really free.
Yeah.
And that's something that is like really sublime. It's not something that can be easily attained. But once you've got that, that's true freedom. And even the word, doesn't it sound beautiful, free? Like if you just say the word free, don't you feel a bit more free? Yeah, just like freedom. It has a resonance to it, even in English. It's something that deep down the human mind yearns for that. We yearn for that release, that freedom.
And
And
the
that's
ironic
something
thing is
that,
we're always free. We just seem to lose track of it in a way. It's like something that's we were born with, but throughout our conditioning and how our body develops, I guess we just get chained down through our own head, which is the crazy thing. It's our own doing, or it's
that's
also
right.
the outside world's doing. But it's like ultimately it comes from us and it comes from others, and we chain ourselves into this small state of awareness and who we think we are. But if we just, you know, it lies in self-inquiry, we can see what we really are. And then when you see what you really are, it kind of will give you that sense or guide you in the direction of purpose.
Yeah, it's being boxed in by concepts, you know. That's what starts to settle in. I saw this very clearly with just observing my niece and nephew, you know, when they were younger, because I don't see them very often. I can see it more clearly. If you see them every day, it's kind of hard to keep track of, but because I only see them, you know, once every 12 months or 16 months or something, it's like, you know, when they're really young, when they're just like not even one or whatever, their eyes are so clear, they're so bright, they're like stars. You know, and it's just a kid, right? It's not like they've done some major spiritual practice in this life. No, that's just their natural state of being. But as they get older, you know, 2 years old, 3 years old, it's starting, when I go back and I'm like, oh, it's like clouding over a bit. And then like the nephew is older, so you can see in him, it's I mean, it's still there. Children still have this sort of like spontaneous, unpretentious air about them, but that brightness, that sparkle, it's dimmed a bit. And it was like, oh, I see it more in the younger one, the niece. But even now, as she gets older, it starts to get dimmer, and it clouded over. And so that natural state of the mind, that pure and radiant natural state of the mind, it gets
like innocence.
Innocence is like, it's a bit too I don't know, it's not an adequate word. It's the radiance of the mind, the natural radiance of the mind. That's it gets clouded over by like concepts and and thinking about things, and then also old habitual patterns that stem from greed, hatred, and delusion. Those habitual patterns start kicking in, and they start being reinforced by acting out on them. So you can see people start, when they start developing their personalities, it's like, yeah, some people, they already have an inclination. It's nothing that happened in this life, but like some kids are just, they're just more like cheerful, and some kids are more withdrawn, or they already have something that's beginning to like manifest, and that's the old habitual patterns, and that's what's covering over that natural brilliance, that natural radiance. And so then that's all you start to know, because that happens so much more than being able to connect back to that purity that's actually within us all the time. It's still there. We just can't connect to it. We can't touch into it. And so we forget it, and we don't have an awareness that it's there, because it's not real to us anymore. We don't experience it anymore. So then then you get boxed in by all that, and you live from that space, and you don't connect back to that vastness and purity of your mind, that the radiance. It's just only in glimpses, sometimes in glimpses, but for the most part, not really. And you're living from a very like a very conceptual mind, a lot of thoughts about things, and opinions about them, and reactions based on that. And then it's kind of a smaller space to live from, and it's stressful. It doesn't have that freedom, that sense of freedom that comes from that vast and open mind. So yeah, unfortunately, we lose touch with it. But you're right, it's always there, or where it's innate. And so and that's something that it can help to remind yourself of that at a conceptual level. That's why view is important, and the Buddhist path, right view. And so having that deep confidence, despite the days, the days will have ups and downs, but the confidence that really, though, the natural state of the mind is purity. It's not something we have to like create, build up, invent, or keep working at it. Isn't working at building it up. Working at it means working at going back to it, connecting back to it, what's already there. It's like a different paradigm if you think of it that way, right? And if it's already there, it doesn't seem so insurmountable. It's like doable. It's like feasible, right? If it's already there, you just have to like go uncover it. Digging is different from like, oh, I have to like somehow like, it's like, I used to be a writer, right? It's like when you're just staring at a blank page. It's like, where is it going to come from? Where are these words going to come from? The tyranny of the blank page. But this isn't like that. It's already there. It's just about deleting. Easier to delete, right, than to like create words out of nowhere and put something on the page. To just press the delete button is much easier. So this is the same. We just have to keep deleting all the like stuff we've covered over, this innate purity. So we just have to. It's a long slog, man. I mean, it's like delete one thing at one, and somehow it like pops up again. Delete. But if you keep deleting and you delete the root cause, then the words don't pop up anymore. And then okay, it's done. And so then it's a returning, and that's isn't that a nice feeling? Freedom is something you're coming back to, and you see that when kids are very young, they have a natural freedom about them. They're not burdened, right? That's why it's so refreshing to be around young children. Right? It's not just because they're like cute, but it's because there's an air of freedom about them, and we all still have that. So connecting back to your so-called inner child or something is maybe it's connecting back to that, is connecting back to your inner freedom. And when you have that sense of that, oh, the inner freedom is always in there, doesn't it gives you, it just, even that idea, it somehow it lightens up whatever difficulty you're going through. It makes it less real. You know, we make it so real where we're experiencing some difficulty. But actually we forget that that's a temporary situation. And the thing that is actually constant is that inner freedom. So yeah, being able to access this at a level that you truly experience that's awakening. So doesn't that sound great? I mean, that if you bill it as freedom, that's something that naturally we all long for that. We all yearn for that. So
yeah, kind of gives people a sense of like hope, or it gives me a sense of hope, at least. You know what I mean? Like to know that not all is lost. There is some kind of I don't know if you want to say order. It's not really order.
yeah.
There's some kind of like meaning, I guess, to what our sufferings, or there's some kind of like reason for our sufferings, and
Yeah.
it's almost like for us to attain liberation in a way.
Oh yeah, because nothing bites more than meaningless suffering, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna suffer, at least, geez, at least have it be meaningful. And that's something that really tripped me up when I was like really feeling a lot of suffering in that second year at college. It was like, but like, what's the meaning? I mean, at least make it be for something, you know, like otherwise it's like completely like suffering for free and you get absolutely nothing back for it, you know. But yeah, that's right. Suffering is a suffering to lead to the end of suffering. So you have to go through it because that's the only way you can understand it. You know, you can't understand something abstract. You have to really experience it. So it's worth it. It is worth it. And if you think about it that way, every time you do meet difficulty and you are experiencing like more than just the vague suffering, but some like really maybe in your face suffering, it's useful to remind yourself that, but this is worth it because I'm going to learn so much from it. You don't really learn so much when your life is going smoothly and everything is easy peasy. You're just coasting. But if you look back in your life, really, I mean, at the time, you know, it's like no fun at all. But if you look back, it's those periods when you're going through some great difficulty, some, you know, like some real suffering in your life, and you think about what happened to you after that. I mean, I guess it can go some ways where you don't learn anything from it and you sort of repeat the same patterns. But in most cases, I think people do learn from their suffering, and you feel you grow through it, you grow from it, and you couldn't grow that way if you didn't have that difficulty. So all of it is like invaluable. It's invaluable. You can't. That's like a pop song back in the day, right? You know, the only way out is through. The only way out is through. You have to go through the suffering. That's the only way you can find your way out. So it's not only valuable, but it's invaluable. You can't do without it. And it's always meaningful if you use it in the right way. If it's only meaningless if you just try to like ignore it, pretend it's not there, you know, and like come over it. But if you're willing to like really just experience it and inquire as to what is the cause of it and really look at it and you learn from it, then it's worthwhile. So if you're gonna suffer, at least, hey, make it worthwhile, you know? I mean, like no point suffering for nothing. It's just completely like, I don't know, it's like, it just seems like, you know, in a capitalist sense, right? It's like no bang for your buck, right? I mean, if you're gonna suffer anyway, learn from it, do something that would be useful from it. And it's not like you can force yourself to learn, but if you pose the right questions, you will, right? If you just ask the right questions about it, what led to this, you know, what caused it, and how can I change certain ways of behaving or reacting to things? If you ask these kinds of questions, or how am I looking at the situation that is causing me difficulty? How can I change the way I look at it? These are questions that they will reward you. They'll be rewarding answers if you pose these questions and you keep with sincerity, you know, like with a real sense of a deep hunger to know. And if you do that, you will grow from your suffering. There's just no way you wouldn't. And then that, and even though it's still unpleasant, but you're less afraid of it. You're less you have less like a tendency to just push it away, because you see that this stuff is like totally what I need to learn. I need this. And it's yeah, it can feel unpleasant, but I'll put up with the unpleasant because I want to learn. And if I don't experience it, I'm never going to learn. So I'm going to face it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to experience it. And there's just no other way. So if you realize that, you're much more willing. You're much more willing, because the other alternative is far worse. It means it keeps coming back, right? And it keeps coming back, sometimes worse than before, because you haven't been willing to learn from it. So that's another way to just think about Kamma. It's not about something mystical, some weird force in the universe, but I feel like one way I like to look at it is just you keep getting the lessons you need to learn. And until you pass the test, you keep getting the same lessons, because it's like, you still need to learn this, kid. You haven't figured it out yet. So that you'll notice throughout your life, you have some eerily similar situations that come up. You know, that the name of the person will change, but it's like the particular things that bug you, you'll keep having them bug you in a different person, a different time, a different place. But it's actually the same exercise if you look at it, you know, clearly, and you take away the details. If you look at the fundamental exercise there, it's like, oh, I think I've had this one before multiple times. Obviously, I haven't figured it out yet. So rather than just resenting that, like, oh, again, why does this keep happening to me? It's like, it's because duh, you haven't figured it out yet. And that'll make you humble, because it's like, okay, I'm working on this same problem. I'm still in grade 3 again, you know, but it's okay, you know, because we all learn at different speeds, and you can't, there's no button you can press to like speed it up. But as long as you're learning, as long as you're willing to learn, there's no going back, you know, there's no true regression. So as long as you keep up that willingness to learn from whatever life, you know, brings you, then there's no, you're always profiting. You're always profiting. There's no like going into the red, as they say about accounting, right? You're always going to be the gain side. And that's something that, you know, it takes time. And so, you know, 10 years is nothing. A lifetime is nothing. It takes like capital T time. So to be willing to be in grade 3 for a while, you know, it's okay. Because each time around, you may not feel like it, but each time around, you are getting a little bit better at, you know, mastering this lesson. You are learning a thing or two. And as the saying goes, I think like 97, I don't know, I'm making it up what the percentage is, but like 90% of education is repetition. You keep repeating the same lesson. You keep working at it, and you know, the light bulb, it's slowly, it just gets brighter. You start to understand it. And then you can move on to the next one. The next package of suffering will be a different one. But yeah, so that's how, you know, I like the idea of education. That's something that you know, as much as I say, oh, ho hum, oh, college, you know, it didn't really, you know, solve things for me or whatever. But actually, one thing I do appreciate is instilling in people love of learning. You know, this sense of just our capacity to train ourselves, to educate ourselves. There's something very uplifting about that idea that the human mind is something that can be educated. It can be trained. Ignorance is something that is not a terminal illness. It's something that, you know, you can actually learn until the ignorance is obliterated. There is a way out, and it comes through studying, you know, not from the books, but well, you know, partly, you know, books, but really studying the human condition, studying the mind, and that comes through the practice as well. But the idea of it being a training, I mean, in a way you could call it the path, but it can also be called the training. So in Buddhist language, it's called the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path. But another way to bill it is called the gradual training. So it's a path on which you train gradually. but the thing is, it's just so, yeah, it's filled with some sense of hope, like you said, use the word hope, in the human capacity to train. We are educatable people, and that is something that is, yeah, that's very affirming. And then nothing is ever, it's not a death sentence, right? It's something that there's an opening there, and then it can be fun, right? If you love to learn, it's fun to learn, even if you learn about your own, like, whatever it is that you find, it's like, oh my goodness, this is not pretty, but you learn about it at some level. You're happy to learn about it, and if you're happy to learn about it, then it's easier to face it. It doesn't become this oy vey, I'm such a terrible person. But no, it's like, okay, I'm happy to learn about this aspect of the human mind. It's intriguing. Even our darkest corners are sort of mesmerizing, aren't they? They're intriguing. And until we can understand it, yeah, we won't know the way out. But it's fun. Isn't it fun? Isn't it fun to like solve something, to learn about something, to like know it from its very depths inside out? There's something so fun about it. So in a way, not in like some sadistic way, but or masochistic way, but suffering can be kind of fun in that sense. It's kind of, yeah, it's just so intriguing. So,
Yes. It's almost like using our suffering as learning, right? As once you recognize that we don't suffer for no reason, we don't suffer for no reason, then there is some kind of, I guess, like we said before, purpose. Like if you realize that it's all just to learn and to grow, there is something, I don't know if comforting is the right word, but there is something that brings me to some kind of peace, I guess. Even though it's like peace knowing that I'm not at peace or not going to be at peace. But I think once you come to the conclusion that you are going to suffer, or you are going to not be at peace forever, then that weirdly brings you to some kind of sense of peace.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's acceptance, isn't it?
Acceptance, yes.
Acceptance is like, it's I think someone said it's like contentment is the sword of wisdom. So acceptance is sort of the same thing. It's a sword of wisdom. It's something that that's why seeing things as they really are, that's how that leads to the end of our suffering. It's because it allows us to accept it. And then we're not fighting it, right? We're not fighting it even at the most subtle subconscious level. We're not fighting anymore when we accept that everything is insecure, everything is impermanent, and everything is, the most chilling of all. It's out of our control. When you accept that, there's an ease about the whole thing. And until you get to the point where you're completely at ease, it's what you're talking about. You're still at ease with the fact that you're going to experience some ill at ease. You're at peace with not being at peace, because deep down, though, it's going to lead to ultimate peace. At the end of the day, there's still a happy ending, but you're willing to put up with all the bumps on the road, because you know that they're inescapable, and also that, yeah, that's how you learn. So even at your most, think of time when you were really very miserable, but if you had those glimmers of those moments when you were like, but I know this is going to lead me to some kind of peace, true peace, then actually it becomes more bearable. So knowing that helps a lot. And if you can reflect back on your life and you can see how those times of troubled seas, how that actually led to some peace on when you get to the other side. When you're going through it, it feels awful, but when you've gotten to the other side and you're like, oh, actually, like you just feel stronger or wiser or something, then you see that it was because you had gone through that. And so the next time it happens, you're more willing, you're more at ease with it, you're more accepting of it, because you see its benefits. And so that's it, being at peace or not being at peace, and that's easier said than done, but it is doable. And also not to set up your spiritual practice with that goal in mind, that you will feel so-called peaceful all the time, as you're doing it, until you get to the really ultimate other side, when you really are at peace all the time, capital P peace. There will be times when you ain't peaceful, and that means you're actually learning. so then that's all right. And so being able to allow space for that, to conceive of the path as being like that, and taking the larger view of it, it makes all those rocky patches less of a big deal. I mean, I know I'm certainly one to like microanalyze. So at the time you're like, oh wait, what's going on? What's wrong? This, that, whatever. But actually, if you like, you just like simmer down and like don't worry about it too much and give it another 6 months or whatever. And yeah, and you're like, oh, okay, it was more like a blip. It was more like a blip. It wasn't like some major like something's really gone wrong. It's just it's a blip. It's a blip. And then you're gonna have that. It's like the stock market, right? Like when you look at the graph going up, it's not linear. It's like jagged. It's jagged, but there is a trend going up. So as long as you're on your spiritual path, you see a trend of greater freedom, then you're on the right track. And the little dips and the little jagged edges, well, that's par for the course. And at the time, it don't feel good. And at the time, you can't tell if it's just a little dip or is it going to be a big dip? Oh no! But keep the faith, keep going, and time will tell. And allow yourself a lot of time, and don't even think about the time so much. We're so imprisoned by that concept of like, fiscal year or whatever. It's all like in these like discrete units of time in which you're supposed to be able to measure something. But yeah, imagine throwing that concept out the window, and then how much freer you would be, and how much more at ease you'll be on your path. You're not constantly trying to measure up to some concept of time that you have. And yeah, that's all the play of the ego. It wants to measure, it wants to control, and it wants to assess your spiritual practice, my spiritual practice, my progress, etc. But again, wrong paradigm. We're always barking up the wrong tree. I don't know why. Grade 3, still at grade 3. But that's just the nature of. So, but the more you can like see through that, then it becomes less fraught and more enjoyable. And yeah, but always coming back to that sense of willing to learn from anything, and grateful to learn from anything. And then if you have that sense of appreciation for the dips in life, if at some level you do appreciate it, like you have some really obnoxious relative, but at some level you still appreciate it, they're your relative, that kind of thing. It's the same with the valleys in life, at some level you still appreciate it, and actually are grateful for that part that's difficult, because that's what's going to stretch you. And it has to happen to you, because we often are not going to engineer our own suffering. We don't have to. It'll come to you. But when it comes to you, you don't have to slam the door in its face. Ideally you'd be able to say welcome and all that, but of course it's harder to do in practice. But yeah, to the degree you can, like, leave the door open, ajar, at least leave the door ajar for the lessons of life to come in and to work on them. And yeah, it's that's why it's something that, gosh, this is something I can never get bored of. Like anything else in my life, I've always gotten bored of it after a while, like, how it is anytime you've mastered something. Like, how to do that thing at your job already, and then you're like, you need a new job because this one's getting boring. Or something you're learning at school, okay, you learned it already, give me the next lesson. constantly getting bored and stuff. But if you're working on something really difficult, it's really hard to understand, boy, at the very least, you're not going to get bored, because like, I still don't get it. Okay, so you keep, you're engaged, right? Because you're like, wow, this is like constantly like challenging me. It's constantly challenging me. So
Yep, the game of life.
that's right. That's right. But only if you're inquiring at a deeper level. Yeah, then it's challenging. And if you feel like you're constantly learning, then that already brings you some level of happiness, even with the tough stuff. There's a sense of like, there's something there, there's a spark there where you're learning. Then there's a gleam in your eye about it. There's still something where you're happy to have that suffering, so
it is it's weird to think about that, because I think most people that, for me, when I started off, I saw Buddhism as almost like nihilistic, in a like, it was like almost pessimistic, right? Like, life is suffering, all is temporary. Like, what? That sounds daunting. It's like, it sounds like something that I would not want to be involved in. But after what we just talked about, it actually is an optimistic view. It's like, no, this is these sufferings that are not of our own accord, that are going to happen to you. It's just the truth. It's actually for you. It's actually for you to learn, to grow.
Yeah, that's right. It's like custom tailored, exactly what you need,
Only if you know that you need it, though, right? It's only the first step is becoming aware. And that's the hardest step. But I think once you become aware, in that first step of learning, like that first enlightening experience, I think is probably the hardest and the most important. But once you open the door, I like to say, you can't close it. Like, once you know what it's about, like why we suffer, what, kind of, it gives you a sort of direction, like a sort of like, just like a dawning of like, oh, this is why, like, but that's just like, then you realize like, oh, now I have to do the work. Like, now that I know all of this, it's like, oh, okay, this is just the beginning, this is just the start, and the start is becoming aware.
Yeah, well, that's what gets you on the path. When you realize there is a problem. Mayday, mayday, there is a problem. And the solution ain't coming from your usual strategies. The solution is coming from taking a different path, and that gets you on the path. But then you got to walk the path, and you're right, it's work. It is work. Yeah, but it can be, you can enjoy your work, right? The trick is to remember how to enjoy the work, even when the work is tough. To remember to enjoy it, and that's something that is in itself a practice, to always find an angle at which you can enjoy it. And then the path, no matter how long it is, you don't mind so much because you actually enjoy it. But I like that idea of when you said that it's like, at least there's a way out, like, yes, oh, great, now I realize you're suffering, okay, now I have to do all this work. But the work actually leads to ending the problem. It actually solves the problem ultimately. Knowing that, then it's not pessimistic, it's totally optimistic. It's like, yeah, you have a major problem, but there is a solution. Exactly. Guaranteed. No exclusions. Everybody has this solution available to them. No one is disqualified. And everyone has that innate ability to arrive at that solution. They keep at it. I mean, how affirming is that? It's like, that to me is like total security, because it's like everyone is able to do this. No one is excluded, and it's assured if you follow the path correctly and you keep at it. And you don't like take a detour and like give up halfway through. And then you're gonna arrive at the destination. And so every hard lesson you're given, if you look at it, it's like, actually, it's a kind act. There's a quote I really like from John Updike. He said, I believe we live in a kindly universe. And I like that idea of it being a kindly universe. I mean, not talking in terms of Dhamma, whatever, it's a kindly universe. And it's sending you lessons that will help you. These are lessons that do not always feel good, but they are there to help you. They're there to help you learn. They're there to help you master the lesson. And it's exactly what you need. I mean, there's all this like technology now that tries to guess what people, oh, you looked at this website, or you clicked on that means you like this, and they start having advertisement that's like tailored for you, and you're like, oh my God, this is creepy. But actually, the universe is better than any kind of like, internet technology. It knows what you need to learn, and it is kindly going to keep handing it to you, at regular intervals.
Until you learn.
Until you learn. But I mean, how great is that? Like, someone has totally custom tailored exactly what I need. Like, to think of it as a kind act. This is exactly the kind of suffering I need. I mean, it's not your suffering. This is suffering for moi. This is, tailor-made for moi. Like, how nice is that? How caring of the universe to send this to me. I mean, it's so hard to think of it that way when you're in the thick of it, but if you do have that view, then it can almost be a manifestation of the kindliness of the universe. And if you think of living in a universe like that, it's so much more I guess encouraging, than all of your suffering or pain is actually it's viewed from that prism of kindness. Then it's a different experience of it. But it's so hard to stay connected to that view because the immediacy of our suffering sometimes is so great. So it takes that ability to distance yourself, like you mentioned earlier, the ability to mentally distance yourself from whatever is the immediate experience of discomfort or pain, to not get bogged down in it, to not get drowned in it, to not just be swept away. And that's where meditation is key. It's like you have to train the mind to be able to distance itself from that immediate experience enough to see that it's just an experience that is happening right now and is not going to happen forever. And you watch it morph. You can just, it's amazing, like anytime you feel really distressed, it only lasts because you didn't stop to look at it. And so you keep feeding it with more thoughts. But you actually are able to like train your mind. Yeah, I'm not talking about major enlightenment experience, but just be able to train your mind to the level where you're able to not feed the suffering with more stories about it, to drop the story, stop thinking about it, and just feel the experience of it in your body and watch that. And you can see that it takes very little time for it to morph. It's like weather fronts. It's like clouds moving. If you ever watch a cloud, you see how it just keeps, it's never still. It's like constantly shifting, even subtly, even on a still day. It's like constantly shifting. And our emotions are like that. Our distress is like that. So our suffering is like that. It's like shifting constantly. And when you watch that, then it's then it becomes less paralyzing, because you're not just lost in it. You're actually watching it, and it gives you a distance, and it gives you the learning that this is impermanent, and it's temporary, and it's shifting, and it's not going to be there forever. Mm-hmm. So don't be so afraid of it. And it's then it's again, it becomes in a weird way mesmerizing. It's just kind of beautiful to watch in a way. In some strange way, it may sound strange, but if you just try doing it, you'll feel like that. Mm-hmm. And so this is all something that can be developed and trained. Again, the mind can be trained to do that. And the more it does that, the more it'll learn. The more it learns, the wiser it'll be. The wiser it'll be, the more it's gonna finally crack the code. To crack the code.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I don't really know what else to say after that. That's I think we can probably wrap it up at that one. I mean, it all lies in self-inquiry. I think we can probably sum up this whole thing is it lies in just, it takes disconnect from the world a little bit and our phones and find some quiet time and see what's going on inside of your mind. I mean, where would you recommend people start this entire process? How can somebody, you don't have to strap on the robes and go join a sangha. How can a layperson start this whole process?
Yeah, well, carve out a corner for that silence and solitude. Make it a priority in your life. You know, people say they don't have the time, but you'll always find time for something you find important.
Mm-hmm.
And you can manage to brush your teeth every day, you know, that's just teeth. Surely you can devote some time to your mind and its upkeep and its health. And so, yeah, I know myself that it took me years to be able to develop, you know, a daily meditation practice when I was a lay person, because even though at some level I thought, oh, this is good for me, it's important, blah blah blah, but other things seemed more important. You know, when I was at school, like doing the schoolwork was more important, or at work, you know, finishing your whatever work assignment was more important. But it was only after I really experienced the benefit of it, you know, when I went on it was only a 10-day meditation retreat, but it was after that retreat when I really experienced some of the peace that comes from some silence in the mind, and you're able to experience that. And it's like, it's just too precious that you just don't want to see it just ebb away. That I was like, okay, and every day I manage at least an hour, you know. And it's only when I actually had a profound not profound, but you know, some deeper sense of the value of it, that you're able to stick to it because it was worth it. And so until you get to that point, you kind of have to talk yourself into it and use a bit of like just give it a fair shot. You know, if you're not anything else, like just give it a tell yourself, I have to give it a fair shot. Before I can assess the value of something, I have to at least do it regularly for a period of time. And so to give yourself a fair deal. And then when you start to appreciate it, it becomes easier to do. But in the beginning, set your goals small so it's achievable. So you're not just like New Year's resolutions and then like 1 week later you're like off the wagon and you feel kind of crappy about yourself. No, it's not like I'm gonna meditate for half an hour every day. It's like I'm gonna like do like 5 minutes at a time that is like more achievable. So if you're not a morning person, don't try to set yourself to do it like first thing in the morning. If you're, you know, find a time that you think you could actually manage to do it, and then just do it. And just being able to stick with it 5 minutes a day, day in, day out, whether you feel like it or not, that is already, you know, a big achievement. So don't sell yourself short, you know, like give yourself some encouragement when you're able to just, you know, sit down in a quiet, and it's helpful if you find a part of your home that is not devoted to anything else, you know, as much as you can. I know some people just live in an apartment or whatever, but at least a corner of the room or something that you set aside for that, a zone, so that you know, like even psychologically when you enter that place, that it's a place of quiet. And you just see what happens, you know, and it will build up over time. But the only advice is start. Nothing more sophisticated than that. Just start. You know, don't wait for a good time. There is never going to be a good time that is ideal. The best time is now. So just start. Start tomorrow. Start today. Just start. Give
Right
it a
now,
shot.
after this podcast, shut off your
Yeah, I
phone.
mean, heck,
Go.
it's only whatever time it is, 7:30, 8:30, whatever in the morning there.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
on
8
another
o'clock
day,
in the morning.
yeah, I don't know what time you normally get up, but it's only 5 minutes. Come on. And so if you kind of can talk yourself into it, but not in a bullying way, like don't bully yourself into doing something that's so-called good for you, because it'll just, you know, it'll just, you know, bite you in the rear end if you do it that way. But do it as an act of kindness to yourself. Just think of it as an act of self-care, act of kindness, and a kindness to other people. That actually, if you give yourself a bit of space for some silence and calm, you'll be such a nicer person to be around. You know, you'll be kindness to the people who have to deal with you. So bill it as an act of kindness, and then you might be more motivated to do it out of a sense of care for yourself. You know, like it's if you want your own happiness, you have to take steps towards achieving it. So if that's actually what everyone wants, you know, then try doing something that might actually help you, you know, in a deeper way to achieve that happiness. And it's not a lot to ask, and it takes nothing. You don't need any equipment, you know. You just need to give yourself the gift of time. So if you value it, then you'll find a way, and it'll teach you that it'll be worth it. No one has to tell you that, so you got to find that out for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's simple. It's experiential.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else to say that you'd like to get off your chest before we wrap this thing up?
Oh, get off my chest. Not really. I just, but I just would like to encourage people, I guess, just to even look into it, to even inquire about a different approach to finding your happiness. Everyone searches for it, but just make a rundown of your normal strategies for achieving happiness, and take a real honest appraisal of how long the happiness that results from it actually lasts, and how conditional it is on external circumstances. And if it's really conditional on external circumstances, then you're really, you're at the mercy of that. So you're not really free. So if you can question that, and then find try to experiment with other alternative strategies, then do that. And life is really, it's shorter than you think. Even you live until you're 80 or 90 or 100, it goes like a flash. And knowing that that's the case, what would be most important to do today? If you knew it was your last day, what would be the most important thing to do today? And to keep asking yourself that, because that's the only way you can light the fire under your bum. Because we are people, we are creatures of habit and creatures of inertia. So we have to find ways to motivate ourselves with a sense of urgency. And it is something that we don't know how long we've got in this human life, and this is the primo opportunity to be able and to be working at this. So I would encourage people to, make a start, and to know that there's a lot of help and support on the path. This is not, it can sound very daunting, but especially now with the internet, there's just so much at your fingertips that you can access, that will help you learn more and be guided on the path. So this is something that, well, of course, humans are better. Don't rely entirely on the internet. Some real life human interaction with a wiser person is not only helpful, it's necessary. So seek that out. But it's possible. That's the thing. It's so possible. So if we have that idea that's possible, we'll be more motivated to even try. If we feel like it's something so beyond us and unreachable, then it becomes very like, okay, maybe at another time in my life I'm gonna start. But it's not hard, to get started. The hardest part is to do it. The hardest part is just to get started. To get started, and just, yeah, and then as best you can, frame it in terms of taking joy in it, taking joy in whatever it is that you're learning from.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know, that's maybe a parting shot, but
Oh, that was
probably,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, that was great. It's finding that within yourself, whatever that is, that kind of peace, and that to know that it's like a journey that you kind of bestow upon yourself. It's something that you kind of, the path, like you said, you have to find the path and then you walk the path, and that ultimately will make you happier in the whole process in the long term, and then it'll make everybody happier. Your energy will just, it'll shine on to other people, and it'll just be like a snowball effect, and ultimately that's how we create a better world. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any more honorable words to say other than that. It's a beautiful statement. So I mean, with that, Venerable Munissara,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on. This
Yeah,
was
you're welcome.
amazing conversation. I hope if anyone listened to this whole thing, I hope somebody got something from it. If nobody did, like I said, I mean, I got something from it. I thought it was great. This was an amazing opportunity for me, and like I said, grateful for you for coming on here. This was amazing. I hope I didn't interrupt anything that you got going on.
No,
No.
yeah, no, I'm happy to share. So thank you for inviting me. And yeah, so whatever if you benefit, great. And whatever doesn't make sense to anybody, that's fine. You know, don't worry about it. And but yeah, we all have to learn for ourselves ultimately. So there's really nothing that will change that. So anyway, I hope whoever's listening, you know, finds out the answers for themselves and then able to share that with others. So yeah, so good luck with your show, and all the best to everybody listening.
Thank you. You as well. And yeah, peace.
That's right. Peace. Capital P.
All right. Well, have a good day.